computer. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Mariza Synder. It's so awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much, Christine. It is such a pleasure, such an honor to be here with you today.
Oh my God. So we are talking about a topic that is, I think, so near and dear to so many women's hearts without them even realizing it, because it's such a huge impact on pretty much all of us these days, right? And it's such a huge impact on our hormones without a lot of women really being educated to the extent. And that, of course, is stress. And we are just bombarded with it left and right. And the thing is, I think, a lot of us can get into complaining about stress and complaining about how many things we have to do. And yet maybe there's an underlying, addiction or issue going on without people realizing it. So I want to hear about your story with stress first. Let's start there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So my story with stress started when I was in high school. I was abused as a child and abused throughout junior high and high school. And I remember there was a defining moment for me when I was 12 years old. I was living with my dad and his evil wife. And I remember I knew that they weren't looking out for my best interest. And I remember sitting on the floor and I made a decision that I was going to find a way out of there. And the only way I knew how to do that was that I had to get smart real quick. I had been a D and C and F student most of my life. And my grandma had told me, my mother's mother had told me that, you want to get smart, you hang out with the smart kids. Like, there were these like little things that I'd heard, from different people. And I was like, I'm getting smart. And so I turned the ship around.
Yeah.
And in high school, I knew that getting into college was going to be a big step in that direction. And my dad and his wife didn't care one way or the other if I went. And so I decided to go. I gunned it. I went full tilt, full throttle into all the activities and into my grades and everything. And I remember when I learned that if you could run during that 5-minute period from exchanging classes, you could actually get multiple activities done. I could go see the vice president or vice principal. I could go and run an assignment over to such and such. I was the editor of the newspaper. I could go do this. And so in like 5 minutes, I learned to always have tennis shoes on because I could run from one thing to the next.
Right.
And I just kept running and I kept running and I kept running until I ran myself into severe chronic fatigue at the age of 30. And really what it stemmed from was a deep-seated fear that even though I kept getting these wins, whether it was valedictorian in college or high school, or whether it was honors in college or becoming a biochemist or whatever, chalking up the things, I kept running and I kept burning myself out. And little did I know, even when I started seeing signs and symptoms around 25 years old, like I started needing a coffee at 2:00 in the afternoon, needing a Kind bar or some little something to get me through the day, I didn't attribute to that being a lot of stress. I was running on fumes. And when I would ask friends and family and colleagues and people in my life, is this normal? I was starting to gain weight. My periods were getting more erratic. I was having brain fog. I was definitely snippy snappy. I was snapping at people. Was this normal? And everyone told me that, yes, this is how women operate. This is, you are an adult woman now. This is how women feel. This is how women, in order to do all the things and be all the things for all the people, you've got to feel like this. And I was like, all right, well then I'm just going to keep doing me.
Right.
And I would leverage, I would get these boosts of epinephrine or these boosts of adrenaline. And I would leverage that as what I consider to be my slight edge. And it wasn't until one day waking up and not being able to lift my head up off the pillow, crawling to my bathroom, trying to get into my office to see patients, that I realized it all had added up over the years. And I was addicted to stress. I had been addicted to stress, and I just been addicted to survival mode. I honestly thought someone was going to take it all away from me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us as women, especially standing on the shoulders of our moms or our grandmas, creating careers, stepping into the unknown of what's possible, and what I thought was endless possibility, I was like, well, I better just grab it all up and hold on and then just elbow anybody who gets anywhere near
Yeah.
me on it. Because I thought that's how I get it's how I was going to become successful. So that, and my mom always telling me not only life was hard, she's like, life is hard. It's just
Mm.
hard. That's it. But also if you want to be successful, you're going to struggle to get
Yeah.
there. And so those were deep-seated beliefs that I believed. And then also coming from a Mexican family, women, you always put everyone else first. You're
Mhm.
always last. So I had a lot of beliefs stacked in against me, kind of those disempowering beliefs that I just rode that wave of disempowering beliefs into chronic fatigue.
Yeah, it's like you had both the like physical experiences that you were going through and then those underlying things too, those belief systems that really built up. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how many women, particularly, in my 20s, I knew that, we're all about, work hard, play hard, right?
Oh
They're like,
yeah.
I want
Oh,
to live life to its fullest. And so as you really, kind of talked about, like, focusing on adrenaline and epinephrine, it's like, yeah, this addiction really does kick in, and women don't understand why they were able to go in their 20s, and suddenly they hit their 30s and they're like, why do I
what
feel
happened?
this way? And it progressively gets
Gets
worse.
worse.
Yeah, unless you do something to help it
It
out.
only gets worse if you don't
Exactly.
do anything.
Sorry, ladies, and you're gonna have to make some deep changes. So tell us a little bit about exactly how, stress and anxiety impact our health.
Absolutely. So more on a physiological level, we think
Hmm.
about the stress response system, which is what we're triggering, what we're upregulating or upgrading every time we're thinking we're running late, or we get a crazy text message, or we think we left something on at the house, whatever that may be, or you're overcommitted.
Hmm.
If you're overcommitted, over obligated, your to-do list, you're not going to finish that to-do list. I mean, what woman has a to-do list that they anticipate finishing
Yeah,
at
right.
the end of
Ever.
the day?
Ever. Yeah.
What woman isn't overcommitted, just trying to fit it all in, right? Those things, you're constantly in a heightened state
Mhm.
of we have to activate that sympathetic nervous system, and we have to activate the stress response system. And they're two systems that work in tangent. One's driving hormones, one's driving the central nervous system, but they work in tangent together.
Mhm.
And when we have that system on 25, 50 times a day, given, eventually it's going to start chipping away. And ultimately what it starts chipping away at is our metabolic resilience. It
Mhm.
chips away at our insulin regulation, because we co-elevate insulin with cortisol, which is our number one stress and survival hormone. You can't do the things if you don't got the reserves, the
Right.
energy reserves, the ATP to do it. And so your body, when it's like, oh my God, we got to figure this out, we got to come up with these energy reserves, your hormones are having to signal out what they're needing, whether they need it or not. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of mis signaling. You end up revving up the thyroid. One of the things that was happening to me when I was dealing with chronic fatigue, I just didn't know that this was happening. A lot of us just don't, as I was dealing with cellular hypothyroidism. And
Mm.
it was behind the scenes. It was happening, very insidious. It's when our cells are perceived danger, stranger danger.
Mhm.
And what ultimately ends up happening, if your cell perceives stranger danger, if your mitochondria, the little powerhouses inside of your cell, realize like, like, she is way stressed. Like,
Mhm.
there's way too much going on here. I need to shut this train down right now. What your cells will do, because what T3 hormone does is it activates your cells to turn on and do stuff. It
Mm.
activates your cells metabolism.
Mhm.
And that means your cells are like, I don't got energy to do right
Right.
now. I'm
Right.
kind of freaking out because I think it's dangerous. And so what your cells will do is they will start to turn off the receptors for T3, so
Mm.
that T3 can't bind anymore to that cell. Also,
Mm.
cells send out a message, an SOS message, to nearby cells that say, hey, I don't know about you, but things got real dangerous over here. I just want to give you a heads up that I'm not feeling this. I think you should act. And so that the next cell will then start to turn off the T3. And so little do I know this is happening. And come 4 years down the road, maybe 5 years down the road, I have real hypothyroid. I have real Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know to look at these things. And so I just want to speak to how insidious chronic stress can be inside of the body. Is it works us on a cellular level, it works us on a hormone level, and it also works us on an emotional level as
Yeah.
well. I think that stress over time really does turn into anxiety, and turns into brain fog, and just has us, we're just more triggered up. That, so anything, I remember just being in a state of like, I wish someone would,
Yeah.
like, just always being in that little tipping point state. Someone say the wrong thing right now and see what happens. This little Latina's gonna pop off, you know? And so that is so often, I cannot tell you, I was like, somebody bring it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
ready for you. And
You're just on the edge. Yeah. Yeah.
you're just
Mhm.
always at that tipping point.
Yeah.
And that tipping point, and how you can kind of gauge if you are stressed is pay attention to how people are responding to you.
Mhm.
Are people kind of you can feel their restriction, you can
Mhm.
feel their hesitation. Like, that's oftentimes a sign that we're in a stress state and have no idea,
Mhm.
how are people having to respond to what I'm doing, how I'm acting in the world.
Right, right. That's a really good point. I want to ask you a question about the
Yeah.
cellular hypothyroidism.
Hmm.
Is that something that, if you're testing, so, a lot of times, unfortunately, they don't test free T3, right? They just look at TSH, maybe free T4, and the active hormone is the T3. Will that show up on a thyroid test early on, or is that kind of like it's not going to really show up until you're already in the full-blown hypothyroidism?
Yeah, it's not going to show up. And more research is coming out about cellular hypothyroidism. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we knew that it was happening on a cellular level
Mm-hmm.
first until
Mm-hmm.
the last, I would say 5+ years, where we
Mm-hmm.
really started to discover that this was going on. But T3 could be a good indicator. Looking at any level, any hormone levels, if you're feeling fatigued, brain fogged, you're feeling like your cycle is off sync, you are dealing with major cravings, constipation, sluggish digestive system, anything like that, the second that go get tested and look at functional lab. So often, medical doctors, we know that their normals are skewed. They're way too broad.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would be considered early stages of like a cellular hypothyroidism may actually even look almost normal, like normal thyroid labs. Definitely your GP, even your
Right.
endocrinologist, would potentially say, oh, these are normal.
Yep.
I remember, I cannot tell you, I've had GPs look at my thyroid labs, and I just giggle, because I'm like, oh, hell no.
You're like, let me tell you, actually,
Actually,
Yeah.
this is a clear indicator
Yeah.
that something
Yeah.
isn't right. And so, yeah, always, looking, and thank goodness, there's lots of great books out there. Dr. Isabella Wentz's The
Yep.
Hashimoto's Protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Amy Myers has got a great book.
Mm-hmm.
There are thyroid books that will give you the normals. I have normals in a lab. I have a big lab report where I have true, really narrow normals to be
Mm-hmm.
looking at, because so often we are missing the boat, and women aren't getting diagnosed with a thyroid issue until 6 to 10 years after
Right.
they've been showing signs for it.
Right. It is one of the biggest things I feel like I have to educate my clients on, because I'll say, I like to look at your thyroid labs just to kind of, oversee and see what's going on. And they're like, oh yeah, they're always normal, and I'm like, no,
Let me look.
right. And to explain the difference between what optimal is and what the reference range of normal, which is insane. I mean, TSH only tells us a little bit anyway, but like, it's like, I think up to 5 or
Up
something
to 5,
considered
like
normal.
double,
Yes,
past
what it should.
double what
Right,
normal is.
right.
I'm like, no, you're in trouble,
Yeah,
girl.
your poor thyroid is just like, oh my god, what is going on? Your pituitary is like, come on, like, let's make this happen.
Absolutely.
So I that's really interesting. I hadn't heard much about the cellular hypothyroidism, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think it's so important for women to really start young, paying attention to their thyroid, because that is such a huge impact on the hormonal shifts and changes that they're going to go into in perimenopause. So
And
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more women, unfortunately, getting diagnosed with hypothyroidism, mainly because of the burnout component.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a thyroid issue, you absolutely have a chronic fatigue issue. You've got a
Mm-hmm.
stress response issue. You have an HPA axis issue and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Now, it may not always be that your adrenals are fully compromised, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely we know that the conversation between the brain and the adrenals and the pathways in between, something, we know that everything's working over time to make all
Mm-hmm.
of that work. And
Mm-hmm.
so anytime we see I see a thyroid issue. And here's the other thing, I'm not trying to scare people, I'm just trying to share what has happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I get my labs ran all the time.
Yep.
Especially with my thyroid, we're always checking them every 90 days. And I run Dutch tests all the time as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically we're looking at urine metabolites of our hormones, which is so important because we really get to see what's going on in terms of our pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And my stress damage is it's so long standing.
Mm.
I just move the needle a notch. And I'm just looking at these and I'm just like, man,
Yeah, come on.
long-term damage that
Yeah.
I've done.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not going to pretend like it's always easy to be who you were and then to be some person entirely. And so I feel like maybe, I'm always kind of, who I am today is not who I was, at 30 years old. I'm
Mm-hmm.
40 now. But have I pushed the limits? Have I, had a book launch, or have I had, something that I thought was really worth fighting for to go
Yeah.
for it? We can get so caught up in our mission, being driven by our mission, being driven by our passion, and not realizing that in that process, we are also we're beginning to drive ourselves back into the ground as well. So there's that fine balance of, loving what you do so much that you don't think of it as work at all. It's literally in your blood, in your cells. It's literally just as much as of you as your
Mm-hmm.
hormonal imbalances are,
Yeah.
and that can absolutely kind of mess with your equilibrium. And so it hasn't been a perfect ride since 30 years old for me, but I've done so many things right, and yet I have to be so diligent every single day on taking care of my body, taking the supplements, eating the right foods, meditating, self-care. I mean, girl, the list
The
is,
list of taking care of
oh
ourselves,
my God, the
right?
list of non-negotiables today
Right.
for me, so that I can just show up in the world the way that I want, the way that
Mm-hmm.
I really want to serve women, show up in my family, show up in my friendships, be the
Yeah.
woman I always wanted to be for the people in my life. There's a lot that got to go on
Yeah.
every day. And then looking at the labs, there are definitely days where I'm discouraged, where I'm just like, man, I feel like I'm doing so much here, but our bodies are very delicate and our systems are delicate, and we can absolutely burn pretty hard, as I did, and it take a long time for that recovery period. And so the reason why I'm sharing this story today is if I can offer any solutions that we can start doing in our 20s and our early 30s, so that you don't have long-standing chronic stress issues and cellular resilience issues, that's why I'm really happy to be having this conversation.
Yeah, and you made so many good points in in that last bit that I just want to kind of note, because I'd say the biggest group of women that listen to this podcast are in that like 30 to 45 range, and I think it is so important for them to hear that even an expert, you know the work is continuous. Like you don't
Mhm.
do this for 3 months or 6 months or a year and then you're like golden, right? Like it really has to be a permanent lifestyle shift to where you put yourself first, right? And that doesn't mean that you're not going to do everything else that you can for other people in your life and for your work and all of that, but you have to keep bringing it back to this thing, even when it kind of goes against another part of yourself, like you were saying, because it's like you love your work and you want to be out in the world doing that as much as you can, but you really can't fully do that unless you take care of yourself. And so it can be a hard conversation sometimes with clients, when they're like, well, how long do I need to do this? And I'm like, some of the stuff
Forever.
I know, like, and there's going to be, you may not do this one thing
Yeah,
forever. Like you're not gonna be taking this one supplement forever, but there's going to be another one that's going to come in its place, and
I know.
that's just the reality of like, I mean, we live in an environment that's pretty toxic, right? You know,
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing how well our bodies do considering all the toxic
Oh my
stuff coming
gosh.
at us. And then no matter what, we still live in a culture that is go, go, go. And so working against that is a consistent, right? To not like fall into that all the time. And then there are going to be moments, like you said, book launches, this or that, we're going to push a little bit past because that's just reality. And then it's like, well, do you have a kind of like plan to really take some breathing room afterwards too, you know, and let your system reset, and know that, you know, you may never have labs that are absolutely perfect, you
No,
know, and
I'd love to see some perfect
I know,
labs.
I'm like, nobody has labs that are perfect, but
We're
it is
always tweaking
always
things.
tweaking. And this is what, you know, those of us that are doing this work in the world, we still have to do that so much for ourselves continuously. So we get where people are at. We get that it can be frustrating when you're like, oh my God, I've done all this work and like here I am and I'm still having these, you know, this issue or that issue. But I like to look at those like you were talking about, like how much has actually changed in 10 years and really focusing on, you know, I think sometimes we forget how bad things were when we start to feel better, right? Because we're like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
well, I still like, I feel this pain or I feel that, you know, and it's like, but remember you also had this and this going on before, and now you have the energy to get through your day, or you know, things like that. And so really looking at those wins a lot of the time and keeping those at the forefront.
Absolutely. Keeping the wins. There's so many ways that we get to celebrate
Mhm.
our wins. And yeah, I cannot tell you how many conversations someone will ask me, well, how long do I take magnesium? I'm like, girl, forever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you need
how long
that
do I have to
magnesium.
eat like this? I'm like, well, how long do you want to feel like this?
Exactly. I'm always like, well, you can always try that food again and see how it makes you feel. Because
Yeah.
usually, you know, yeah, I just had a client the other day, and she, you know, had a pretty strong dairy intolerance on the food intolerance test that we'd run. And she was like, it's been maybe 6 months. And she's like, I'll just try a little. I
Little
know,
ice cream, little something.
just
No.
a little something. Oh my God, it took her down for 2 days. She was like, I don't know if I'll ever eat dairy again. And I'm like, you probably will try it again. But you know, especially when you've removed it and it's really something that just doesn't work with your body, you feel it like
Well, you pay
instantaneous.
the
Yeah,
price.
you do.
You it's coming for you. The
Yeah.
gluten is the same thing too. My
Gluten,
mom,
yes.
I've taken my mother off gluten so many times. I'm like, Mama, it is not for you. And
Yeah.
then she'll have like a little
Yeah.
something and it'll floor her
Yeah.
for a day and a half. And she'll call me and she's like, Mariza. And I'm like,
I
I don't
told
know
you.
what you're looking for from me. I told you.
Like, there's nothing I can do to change that. I'm sorry.
Luckily, Mama, there's other options.
Yeah.
I mean, like in same with dairy options.
Yeah.
I don't even think about dairy because we've got almond milk, organic almond milk, and we've got
Cashew
cashew
everything. I'm like,
cream.
love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cashew ice cream or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean,
Yep.
there are, and those are still treats.
Yeah.
Those are treats.
Yep. Yeah. Not
And so we do have a lot. I mean, thank goodness so many of us are struggling with inflammation because that's really what that is, Christine,
Mhm.
right? Inflammation.
Mhm.
I know what stress is doing to me. It's
Mhm.
inflammation, and I know what certain foods are. And I think a long time I learned, especially in that, it took me 2 years to really heal from that chronic fatigue. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like I wasn't doing the right things. I think the big moment for me is I didn't realize what beliefs were driving me back to the ground.
Mm.
And until I finally saw those, I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I just can't green smoothie my way out of this. I
Right.
can't just supplement my
Right.
way out of this. I've got
Right.
to, what's the core driver for me here? Why
Mhm.
am I continuing to do the same thing over and over again?
Mhm.
And expecting a different result because
Right.
I'm drinking green smoothies over here.
Right.
And so, getting to those beliefs are going to be so key. But then what I realize is every day we are making decisions.
Mhm.
Every day, every morning, I get to decide whether I Tasmanian devil myself into my day or
Mhm.
I do my meditation, I do my journaling, I drink my matcha tea. It's really about those every meal. I
Mhm.
choose what I put into my body. And so I believe that our health is just made up of a million little decisions. And every
Yeah.
day we get to make those decisions. And if for some reason it doesn't go the way that we want, we get to start again tomorrow.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's how I've always looked at it is I'm just trying to bite that elephant one little bite at a time. And I don't give myself a hard time about it. I know that I get another day. If I I have not made the best decisions, if I chose to work till 3 in the morning, I
Mm-hmm.
know I shouldn't have been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I get a reset the next day. I
Yeah.
know I get to bring back those non-negotiables that I know are so necessary for me. So
Yeah.
I don't want women to beat themselves up about that. Just note that every little supplement you take is a little win in the right direction. Every little
Mm-hmm.
smoothie you drink is the win in the right direction. Every time that you say no to those potato chips,
Mm-hmm.
if you know that they're causing inflammation in your body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of telling people you have to break up with these foods, or these foods are bad. We just know how we feel.
Yep.
And if it doesn't feel good for you, it's always a win when we really take care of our bodies the way that our bodies love it.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that's how I always think about things. It's the little hinges that are swinging the big doors that
Yeah.
I'm looking for in this journey. And this journey, it never ends.
Right.
There in the last 10 years, have there been some really great chunks of time? Hell yes. Have
Mm-hmm.
there been some really challenging chunks of time? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's always fluid. It's always shifting. And as long as we're open to that, and we're always looking to really take care of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in this world where women are trying to find their footing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of how we've learned to do careers and to do business is with masculine energy.
Yes.
I think we're
Yes.
still trying to figure out, how do we create the success that we deserve, that we have the talents and the gifts to create in our own energy.
Yes.
And so
Mm-hmm.
we're still figuring that out. This is like one
Absolutely.
of the first generations where women are running careers, CEOs, showing up in the world in a massive way. And we're navigating what that feels like and looks like. How do we do that for our physiology? How do we show up for our family at the same time? And so I think that's the reason why we see so much upheaval, besides the toxins and the environment and all the other
Mm-hmm.
things that we've got going on. You know, just trying to find my footing in doing it the way that feels good, and I'm still creating what I want.
Yeah.
And those first 10 years, I thought the man's way, like
Right.
the masculine way, was the only way.
That's the only thing we knew, right? I
It's the
mean,
only thing I knew.
I feel like the discussion around running businesses from a feminine perspective has really just been in the last few years. And it's really, just been a discussion. And it, like you said, it's like women are really trying to figure out, well, how does that actually show up? How does that actually work? Because we can kind of talk about it, but then it's just so easy to fall back, especially with how much we're on social media now, and we see all these other people doing all these things, and it's just this constant reminder of like the hustle. I mean, like,
The hustle,
hustle has
the grit. Yeah.
right became this like power word in a few years ago, and so it was this badge of honor, and I get it, and I'm not trying to take away from any of that, and I've done it too, but I know that for me that directly like led me to a massive fibroid growth, and so that way of working was not working for my body. And that's what I try and just talk to women about. All of us are really trying to find that way of like, how can I work with my body and do the work I want to do in the world? And everything that you're saying is like how we have to have what we have to do at base in order to really show up in the world, I think, in the way that we want to.
And I think we get a lot extra grace required
Yes.
for all of us trying to figure that and navigate with that. My mom, who was always kind of a role model for me, my grandfather was, a male entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
growing up, and he established pretty strong values in my mom and my uncles, very masculine values. And I
Mm.
remember watching that with my mom. My mom had her power suits on. She had this walk and this switch like I've never
Love
known.
it.
And I remember she had this power walk, and she always was owning. She had ownership. She had confidence. I don't know where she was going somewhere all the time. Like
Did she like walk really
oh
fast
yeah,
too?
it
I
was
imagine.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. And you could hear her keys because she was a single mom, and so we
Yeah.
would be at summer camp or after school camp, and she was like the MILF of
Oh, I
all the
bet.
kids, and all the summer camp counselor men, like
You're
the
like,
college
hey.
kids, were just like, oh, here comes Jody, and it's always seen that growing up, and I was like, okay, this is how powerful women are. This is
Right.
how powerful women show up, and then the language my mama would use is like, you're gonna have to fight for your success. You're gonna have to elbow
Mm,
your way up to the top. You're gonna have to, and I was just like, okay, all right,
yeah.
check. I'm checking off all these boxes of the things I was told I need to do to create any level of success.
Right.
This is a woman coming up in the 80s and the 90s looks very different than someone coming up in 2020.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
mhm.
Yeah.
And a lot of the books, a lot of our success books, even written by women, are written in a masculine way. And I still think, yeah, extra grace required for many of us who are trying to still figure out what that looks like.
Yeah.
And to me, so self-care is has to be a part of that conversation. It's got to be a non-negotiable. And
Right.
luckily, there's so many ways to get it in.
Yeah.
I always say self-care is a must for survival
Absolutely.
with today, because women are not only wearing the hat of running careers or even running businesses, but also if you're a mama, you're a mama. Like, there's no changing that.
Yep. You're
And
turning that off. Yeah.
no,
And
and
so,
so those are lots of hats to
yeah.
wear, and lots of roles to play, and navigating all of that, and the guilt that comes with that and it just is very exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always like to point out to people, because I think there, became a sort of popularized vision of what self-care means. And don't get me wrong, I love massages, get massages all the time, but that's getting massages and drinking wine is not really the self-care that women need, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's a, like, the massages are good, but it's a band-aid. The wine is its thing, it's its own thing. And I'm not putting down anybody that drinks wine, and I do on occasion, but true self-care looks very different, right? It's about, for me, it's about like getting really quiet, because there's all of this going on all the time, right? That's getting all that stress going on inside of me all the time. And so I really have to get quiet. And, I found the ways that work for me. And so it's like, for each woman, like, what works for you to actually get quiet,
absolutely.
so you can disengage from all of that chaos going
Yeah.
on.
Self-care may be boundaries.
Yeah.
Self-care may be, yeah, saying no to people
Yeah.
who you need to say no to. Self-care may be getting rid of toxic people,
Yes.
who are
Yes.
not putting into your ear what you're looking to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Self-care is supplementation. Self-care
Mm-hmm.
is nourishing your body. Self-care is, yeah, taking that moment to quiet your mind. Self-care is gratitude. It's
Mm-hmm.
self-care are these little things that don't have to cost any money at all.
Yep.
And self-care is done, I say, it's all throughout the day. I do self-care in the morning, self-care in the evening, throughout the day. Self-care is checking in with yourself
Yes. Yep.
and seeing what you need, because so often we don't know how to ask ourselves what we need. I've asked so many women, do you even know, like, have you checked in with yourself lately? And they're like, huh?
Yeah.
Or
That
my
was
favorite
I.
is to ask, like, do you know what you love? Like, I have this thing where I love, I've created, I share is creating a joy list,
Mm,
and having 10 things that are absolutely free that you love to do, and
mhm,
10 things that maybe it's like your favorite matcha,
mhm,
your matcha at your favorite little cafe, or maybe
mm,
it's flowers at Trader Joe's that you love to bring into your
mhm.
house. Like, nothing super grandiose, but something that really just makes you happy and brings you joy.
Mhm.
And so often women have never even asked themselves what
Right,
they love or what brings them joy.
right.
And that can easily be integrated into self-care. Those little wins where every time you walk in the door and you see those beautiful flowers that cost you $5.99 or
Right.
whatever, that those, like, they just bring a little smile to your face. It can be so simple as that. It doesn't have to be complicated. I rarely get massages. And
Mhm,
also, just speaking to wine, and I love me some wine. We
mhm,
go to Italy, we buy lots of wine when we go there.
mhm.
But as I'm noticing, as I'm getting older, and I'm just speaking for myself, although I've done the research too, is that our livers, I talked a lot about, when you were on my podcast, about the
Mhm,
liver and estrogen
mhm.
dominance, and our liver detoxification pathways. I'll tell you what, your liver is not a fan
It is, the
of
older you
alcohol.
get, yeah, I don't know if I feel like it's really that perimenopausal
Oh
time in
yeah,
particular, right?
it
Like, I know
kicks.
women that actually, after menopause, they can handle wine better again. Like, it's very interesting, but yeah, ooh, it changes.
It does change. And I just want to just bring the highlight to that. I know
Yeah.
so often we're leveraging wine to wind down and to relax. And yes, we do deserve that little thing. But I just want to if you do see yourself exhibiting signs of estrogen dominance, maybe you're struggling with migraines, maybe it's fibrocystic breast, maybe it's heavy bleeding, maybe it's gas and bloating or PMS symptoms that just feel like just wildly erratic. It may be worth just seeing what happens if you put wine to the side for just, 30 days.
Right.
Just to
Just try it.
see. I wish that wine wasn't doing that to me. I've got amazing bottles of wine in my house. And I remember I was sitting down with my husband one day, like just like really a like real strong moment where I was like, I think, honey, I don't think I can do
Do
this
this. Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up the next day, just one glass of wine and
I'm the same way.
one. And I can't fire on all cylinders in
Yep.
an episode. I can't show up for people the way I want. And he's just like, I'm so sorry.
I
And I was
know.
like,
He's
it's
like,
coming for
I'm a
you,
male and I don't have to even think about any of this
yeah.
stuff. You're
And
like,
I'm
whatever.
right. It's just the reality, and having that conversation to him is more a little bit of like just me working it through. There's something to be said of having to finally come to terms with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just wanted to speak to it because I know so often we don't always feel or notice, but especially when we kind of hit that 40 year old mark, I began to notice that women are exhibiting signs. It's not a glass of wine isn't as easy as it used to be.
No, I know. And I've heard many a woman bemoan that, right? They're like,
Mhm.
I don't understand. I just had a glass and I feel hungover. And I'm like, I know, girl, I know. I want to go back to, you made such great points of things that women can do for self-care, which I think is really important because it is this kind of like term that a lot of women don't really know what that means. And those things are so important to understand. And, I thought about one of the things that I started I'd noticed a while ago, but really started concretely trying to shift my perspective around or just be cognizant is, like talking about a to-do list and getting to the end of my day and being like, damn it, like I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done. And just recently I've been like, let me look at all the things I did get done and do that focus on all the things that I actually did get done that day. And it's amazing how different I feel. Like I feel like accomplished at the end of the day versus looking at the stuff that I did not get done, So it's like self-care can even show up in those ways because we're constantly beating ourselves up as women of not doing enough in our lives with the unending
Absolutely.
to-do lists,
No, women have not been taught to celebrate wins.
Yeah, not at
Not been
all.
taught. And another way you could form that too. So I book in my morning and my evening with gratitude. And my
Mm.
morning, it's written down. And in the evening, I have this little crystal,
Mm-hmm.
and it's at my bedside. I actually have a couple crystals.
Gotta
At my
have
bedside,
crystals, of
I
course.
grab a crystal,
Yeah.
whatever crystal's feeling good to me that night.
Yeah.
And they thank God in the universe for all of the things, all the things that I'm grateful for that day, all the
Mm-hmm.
wins that I'm grateful for that day, all the little things that happened, that it was just beautiful and sunny, that my husband helped me out in this one particular project, just anything and everything. And it
Mm-hmm.
usually takes me a little over, almost 2 minutes to get through all of the things that I'm grateful for, even
Mm.
if I've had a crap day.
Yeah.
Like I'm just like, can we just get this day over with?
Yeah.
Put it back.
Seriously. You're like, nothing good
Like,
happened today. Yeah.
get to tomorrow
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
And I still, I do this gratitude ritual, and it's such a game changer for me. It just
Mm.
changes perspective. It really opens. I always think that gratitude opens the door for endless possibilities. And
Yes.
so even if it's just that, just being grateful for these little things, it doesn't have to be a bunch. It could be just 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it could also be gratitude for your wins. I have this mirror exercise that I always talk about, where at the end of your day, you go to the mirror and you have your gratitude. Then you celebrate all the things that you accomplished that day. And at the very end of that exercise, you tell yourself that you love yourself. You say, I love
Mm.
you. And it is the most uncomfortable exercise in the
Of course.
beginning. To tell yourself that's the hard thing, is to tell yourself that you love yourself, and,
Yeah.
and how much you're grateful for all the things that you did that day for your, for your family,
Mm.
for everything that you do. And it's a really, really powerful exercise. I always tell people to give themselves 30 days to do this mirror exercise and see how things begin to shift in their life.
I'm adding that one to my list. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
So one thing I know we talked a little bit, but I wanted to kind of just dive in a
Mhm.
little bit more to what is, the like actually getting addicted to stress chemicals? Like, what is that all about?
Absolutely. Such a great question.
Mhm.
So basically what happens when we so perceive stress. So you and I could be we could be walking together,
Mhm.
doing our thing. We're going shopping,
Mhm.
whatever we love. We're going to go get a matcha latte, and something could happen in front of us. Maybe there was an accident, or maybe we were involved in an accident. Maybe some guy ran into us or something. And depending on our experiences, our past traumas, our personality, that incident could look very different for you than it looked very different for me. And so our perceived stress response system, so we call it perceived stress, right, is based on what we perceive that stressor to be.
Mm.
What we do know is that over time, as our obligations stack and things begin to kind of feel, just overloaded, that perceived stress response system is easier to trigger off. And
Mm.
so that is because of our what we call inside the limbic brain. We have a hypothalamus, pituitary, all of like the hormone master center, but we also have the amygdala. And I call the amygdala the stranger danger center.
Mm.
It's constantly sensing, especially as women. I remember my grandma taught me, oh my God, my grandmother, my mother's mother,
She
she
sounds amazing.
she's something else. So she's always had stranger danger
Mm.
signals on. So as a little
Mhm.
girl, like literally at the age of 4, I knew to put keys in my knuckles,
Right?
because
Where it's
she
like
was
out like
like,
that.
someone could kidnap you and steal you. And that
I
woman was
remember
like
that.
on high alert.
She's
So,
like, I'm ready. Nobody's
and
kidnapping my daughter or my granddaughter.
yeah, she fired up our amygdalas way early in
I
life.
bet. I
And
bet.
so,
Yeah.
and my grandma was always just, and I think she never has told anyone, but I think she had a lot of trauma when she was a little girl.
Right.
Things had gone awry. And
Yeah.
so for her, um, and so when we have those types of issues that happen, whether they're traumas, and we know that traumas come in so many forms. They could be big T's, they could be little T's.
Mhm.
Either way, those traumas, they're stored in our amygdala. And when anytime we sense a circumstance, whether it is a deadline, whether it's a stranger that we think is following us, whether it's a to-do list that doesn't end, we trigger up that amygdala.
Mm.
And what happens is that amygdala sends chemical signals to the hypothalamus that says stranger, danger, high
Mm.
alert. And your brain doesn't know the difference between a tiger or a bear and a deadline. It just
Right.
doesn't. And so as we continue to stack the plate, we can trigger up the stress response system up to 50 times a day. And it's much higher in women than it is in men.
Mhm.
And not to say that men aren't in high stress scenarios and high stress jobs, they absolutely are. So it definitely can happen in men as well. And every time we turn and we upregulate that the HPA axis, our survival mode, we dump initially if it's acute, it's epinephrine and adrenaline,
Mhm.
and we dump that first, and that allows us to freeze, fight, whatever we got to do. It's what I call that slight edge. And
Right.
so that's that
And that's
extra
coming
little
from your
energy
adrenals, right?
that's coming from
Yeah.
your adrenals. So
Mhm.
yeah, so your brain sends a message to the adrenals. The adrenals dump epinephrine and adrenaline like that.
Mhm.
And that, especially at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that can feel like extra energy.
Right. You're like,
And you're like, whoa, what
yeah,
was that? And
yeah.
and that's the thing. That would be the thing. I remember I would get like I would be on a deadline, and so many
Mhm.
of us as women, the reason why we keep ourselves maybe hyper scheduled is that
Mm.
we're rushing to the next thing. We love that rushing to the
Right.
next thing.
Ooh,
I remember
yes.
I would rush to somewhere and I had nowhere to be.
Right.
I don't know if that's ever happened to women who just rush to the
Yeah.
next thing, but they don't have to be there. You don't even have to. You're not on a schedule.
Right. I
It's
could,
just that
I,
you're running.
yeah. And I can think about like for myself, like just this feeling, like that surge maybe made me feel more important in some ways or
Yeah.
something like that, you know?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
more important, more
yeah.
busy.
Yeah.
And you find women who are saying things like, I'm busy, I've got to go.
Yep.
I've got something to go, I got something to do. I don't have time for this. All those, that languaging, that's the language of a rushing woman.
Yes.
Someone who is struggling with rushing women syndrome. But there were times where I would do things. I was always running on efficiency. And so let's say I was heating something up. Maybe it was even a cup of tea or something, or maybe it was like I was heating up a meal or putting something in the oven. Like I would put it in there. I would take a shower,
Wow.
and I could have everything timed in 5-minute increments. Like I could do these micro things, and it was this little, like I would just get this rush from
Yep.
like trying to meet my
Get it
deadline,
all
my own
done.
little
Yeah.
self-preserved deadline, or even getting gas at the gas station. Nobody can beat me getting gas. No one can beat me. No one can beat me peeing. I feel like
You're like,
a
I am the
guy.
fastest female
I'm
peer
the
in the
fastest
world.
peer in the world. Like if you're in line behind me, it's your lucky day. I will be in and out of there faster than the guy who just walked into the men's room.
Right.
And so I can get in and out of an airport. I've timed myself in and out of TSA. Like this is an addictive stress personality.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so and not even knowing,
Yeah.
not just
I love
having.
that you're bringing up all these specific little things though, because I think women can like see themselves in it, versus like, oh, this is me just being efficient, or this is me just being, like multitasking. But
Mhm.
it's like there is this underlying thing that's going on.
Oh yeah, you can't do those things without kicking in.
Yeah.
Because your body thinks you're in emergency mode. It doesn't realize you're just trying to be efficient.
Right.
It just, and you're also leveraging those chemicals. And so that's where the addiction begins to form. And
Mm,
again, most of us don't know what's happening. We just think we're getting that little extra something to
hmm
get through. Where it becomes insidious. I mean, it's one thing to rev up adrenaline and epinephrine. And then the next hormone that comes in, a couple minutes later is going to be cortisol. And
hmm
cortisol is for sustained stress response. And whether you know it or not, whether you just think you're being efficient or not, whether you keeping yourself on a deadline, that is coursing through your body.
hmm
And that is longstanding. And that's where we start to see the effects and damage of chronic stress. Chronic stress drops your IQ. When you're in survival mode, you don't need to solve a math problem. You need to
Right.
get through the next thing. And so you turn off the prefrontal cortex, you activate the limbic system. And so we start to we make very fast reactive decisions.
hmm
um, yeah, and you'll just notice that, and yeah, it can work to your favor, but it also can work to your detriment.
Right.
Also, the other thing is you start to upregulate insulin. Your
Mm,
body just thinks that you need to be able to get that glucose. And
right.
so that begins, so you'll start to see abdominal belly fat. Then you'll start to see the thyroid lab start to change, but you'll also start to just feel tired. And you won't feel tired initially in the morning. You'll feel tired in the afternoon or about 5 o'clock. You'll hit that dip, and then you'll need something to get through your day. Or you'll find yourself at night and your brain just won't shut off no matter what. The
hmm
mental chatter just goes. And that's when you need that glass of wine to shut the system down. And then what you'll start to begin to see is that you start waking up. No matter how much time you had in bed, how much sleep you got, you're going to start waking up exhausted.
Still
because
exhausted. Yep.
because that cortisol so there's what we have, a cortisol awakening response,
hmm
and it's a little surge that happens every morning when you wake up, and it's what gets you from in bed to out of bed.
Yep, exactly. I'm
Yes.
all like, it's nature's coffee, even though coffee comes free.
Exactly.
It's your body's
You want to
coffee.
get your booty out of bed,
Yeah.
you need that
Yeah.
boost.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that you've been leveraging it over here. You don't have it so much in the morning, and so all of it, you just can't get out of bed.
hmm
And that's when you have got a
In
situation on
trouble.
your hands.
Yeah.
You're in trouble now.
Yeah.
Now you've got some massive repair that needs to happen.
And I'm really glad you brought up the cortisol and insulin connection, because I don't think everybody sort of understands as that cortisol is upregulating, the insulin response is there's starting to be issues there, and your blood sugar is going up. And so those go hand in hand. I feel like a lot of people have kind of talked about, a lot of people know cortisol is the stress response, maybe because of the belly fat thing, but what happens after a while is your body it's like, we've been producing too much cortisol for too long, right? And then, like you're talking about, the exhaustion kicks in because now your body's down regulating that cortisol, right?
Yeah,
And
it has to. It has
yeah,
to protect you.
to survive, yeah.
Mhm.
And so when your immune system, you can tell
Oh,
me if
I
I'm
wanted to
wrong.
talk about my immune system. Oh my goodness.
Well, when the cortisol is high, your immune system is actually depressed also, right? Because
Initially, it's up,
okay,
but
right.
eventually it
It goes
depresses.
down. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you end up like me,
Yeah.
where I was sick 7 to 11 times a year.
Whew.
And this was after the chronic fatigue.
Wow.
And I had massive co-infections. I either had a
Mm,
flu or a sinus infection or a cold, and it was constant.
mm-hmm.
And it was one of the last things I was able to restore after I was able to regulate my hormones. I was concerned. I thought I just broke my immune system. I was like,
Right.
okay, well and I'm so grateful, given that, one of my biggest root causes for the body and for hormones to deregulate
Mm-hmm.
is co-infections, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
bacteria or viruses or
Yes.
whatever. And one of the reasons why we kind of drop this threshold is because of stress.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you brought all of that up, because one of the things I do often with clients first off the bat is run a GI map, so we can see what kinds of underlying infections are going on, because people's immune systems have been in overdrive for so long, and because of the stress, right? And then the immunity is just lowered. It's fighting these pathogens all the time. It's dealing with the stress all the time, and particularly in the world that we're living in right now, dealing with the pandemic. It's like, we have to look at our immune systems in a different way, right? Because it's not as simple as all of us. And I've not been against,
Taking vitamin D.
right, 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 right. But, and I've not been against like us quarantining or anything, but there is that point where we have to figure out how to support our immune systems better. And that's not a conversation that is being had
No, it's not.
in a big
No, it's
way by
not.
the powers that be, right?
Right. Viruses and bacteria and parasites, and it's all out there.
Yep.
And it's really whether your immune system can tolerate. And
Mm-hmm.
and what we're seeing so much with this particular virus is our metabolism and our metabolic resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And really what it all comes down to is inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the
Yes.
yes, it
I'm
is.
like, inflammation.
I mean, and one of the biggest ways that we're creating inflammation is stress.
Yep.
It is just what it is. And we've got to look at those. I had a whole episode on, how to boost stress, how to reduce stress to boost your immune system.
Mm.
Because right in particular, I mean, I don't know about you, I'm still in my home.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have been home since
Yeah.
February.
Yeah.
Um, and there have definitely been moments of massive stress and anxiousness and
Mm-hmm.
unknown and fear, and it's something to be really mindful of, because it's not doing your immune system any favors.
Exactly. That's the other thing, is yeah, all of it is like, all of it impacts our immune system, and I have some friends that are immune compromised, because there's a lot of people that are immune compromised. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, when people are like, just send out the healthy people, I'm like, how many of those do we have in the United States right
Well,
now?
and how many people know that they're healthy? I mean, how many people know
Yeah.
that they've got a autoimmune condition under
Right.
the surface?
Right.
We don't know we have them typically until we
Way
get
long down the
diagnosed.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had them. And so I think
But
a lot of people think that they're healthy when stuff
yes.
is going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's such a important point that I try and bring up to people. But also, some people that are in quarantine, they like, the amount of alcohol that they drink has gone way up, and
Or
and I
gluten.
and
Yeah,
gluten. Oh, definitely the foods, But I also find it fascinating where I'm like, okay, so you're quarantining to not be around, this thing because of autoimmunity, but like, then you're drinking alcohol like a lot more than you were before, And again,
yeah.
here and there, it's like, it is what it is. But what consistent alcohol every, especially if you're in perimenopause, if you're doing that every day at 5 o'clock, this is not going to be good for your immune system.
No, and not, and where that really shows up, and where you speak to that in such eloquence, is going to be in the gut and in the
Mm-hmm.
liver.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're wondering what's going on with the immune system, if you're wondering if stress impacts your digestive system, that would be a yes.
Yes.
That would be a yes, yes. From leaky gut to gut microbiome issues to opening the door for infections, stress is absolutely a gateway for that
Mm-hmm.
as well. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so if there were people like questioning us right now, well, how does stress connect to this? Well, I could tell you. How does
Yeah.
stress connect to that? Well, I could tell you. It is having an impact on your brain, on your sugar levels, on your liver, on your gut. Stress is stealing pregnenolone, which is your progesterone precursor. You're wondering why you ain't got no progesterone, wondering why you have estrogen dominance. Best believe stress is playing a role in that,
Yeah.
area as well. And so there's just no area where I haven't seen stress, be a detriment.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
absolutely plays a role in our hormones
Yeah.
and our gut health and all of it.
Oh my
And
God.
just our overall well-being,
Yeah.
just how we feel.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
just who doesn't want to I'll tell you what, feeling good feels a lot better than feeling stressed.
It's so true.
I like it more.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is kind of getting over that addiction. And I do want to, we talked a bit about self-care, but what are some other things that you recommend to women to really, start to work with their stress in a different way?
Absolutely. Well, that first step really is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all you couldn't have told me nothing,
Right.
and so I just didn't know. And I think if I had heard this conversation back then, the ding, 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 I would have started putting the pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would have told me, hey, you can actually create success and not destroy your body, I would have been
Mm.
like, oh, I'm listening.
You're like, tell me about that.
Tell me about that, because I don't know if that's true.
Right.
But I'm open to hearing possibilities.
Yeah.
I think that first step is really, again, self-awareness, and it is not easy to notice.
Mm-hmm.
You have to notice whether you're using language like, I gotta go, I'm in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
I can't stay, I got stuff to do, I got to do,
Yeah.
like
To do.
that
Yep.
language, and so looking at that, looking at how you feel, your physiology. Are you feeling like constricted?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking fast? Is your heart beating? Are you moving fast? And how are people responding to you?
Mm-hmm.
That's always a good indicator. If
Mm-hmm.
your husband's giving you the side eye and he's trying to run the other direction, or your partner, there's a good chance
Yeah.
you are in a stress response system, like
Yeah.
you're in stress response mode. Then it's a matter of changing your physiology.
Mm.
And it's a lot easier than you think. Your body can absolutely, so with the autonomic central nervous system, going from sympathetic to parasympathetic actually is quite fast.
Mm.
Turning off the hormones, it's a little bit more of a process. Our central nervous system works very quickly. That's why
Mm-hmm.
if you touch a hot iron or a curling iron, you
You
by the time
automatically
your
pull
brain even
back.
registers, you pull back. But hormones do take a little bit longer to respond. However, they will respond too. So it's either just moving, shaking it off, taking some deep belly breaths, grabbing an essential oil. Essential oils are my favorite ways
Mm.
to take you from 100 to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's a blend or an oil that you love, that's connected. It's really, to me, it's about sending safety signals to the brain. It's
Right.
really, because right now your brain doesn't think that you're okay.
Right.
Your brain thinks that you're in survival. It doesn't, whether you're kicking booty or not,
Right.
that's just where your brain's at with it. And so grabbing a scent that sends a safety signal to the brain that says everything is okay,
Mm-hmm.
really it literally down regulates that stress response system.
Nice. And we actually have a free gift from you
Yeah.
that is an essential oils cheat sheet. So
Yes.
people can go to the notes of the episode and grab that for sure. So thank you
Yeah.
for offering that to our listeners.
Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
blends for instant energy, because who doesn't need
Yeah.
instant energy yesterday?
Yeah.
There's blends for stress and anxiety, and there's blends for brain fog. Really, just really the things that every day are popping up for us
Mhm.
as women. You just, that when eventually when the word just poofs disappears, like you're like,
Mm.
where was most of my sentence just now? Just
Mhm,
because, like,
mhm.
that brain fog.
Yeah.
So those blends will handle all of that. But it's really just finding something that smells good to you, that tells your brain that everything's good. Maybe it's a
Mm.
5-minute nature walk. Maybe it's speed dialing or texting a best friend. There's all little ways to change your physiology. And it's a practice. Now,
Mhm.
if you're saying to me, Dr. Marisa, Christine, I do not know when I'm in that state,
Mhm.
I'm pretty much operating there all the time, then what I also recommend is taking your phone and putting a little chime, not no dogs barking, no alarm system. Oh my God, when people that goes off, I'm like, what are you doing to all of us?
We're all like, "Oh." Yeah, not good.
That jolt, that's a stress response
Right.
mode, whether you know it or not. Like that feeling. I, when people trigger my stress response system, I get so mad. I'm like, how dare you
I know.
trigger
Come
me?
in here and try and do that. I was feeling all good and calm.
I was don't overwork my system. So have something beautiful. Have some little beautiful
Mm.
chime. Maybe it's the water rushing. Maybe it's a stream.
Mhm.
Get in where you fit in. There's all kinds of sounds out there.
Mhm.
And every hour on the hour, have it, in your work or wherever you're at, and let it go off. It goes off, and you just sit and you take some deep breaths. And
Mhm.
I have a technique I call the power of the pause, where I grab an oil, usually lavender or bergamot or
Mm.
jasmine or something. I have a little blend in my purse, or I have it in my office. And what I do, I call it the power of the pause, because it's a quick little meditation. And I take my oil, I put it on my palms, I breathe in, and I hold my breath for 5 seconds at the top of the inhale, and then breathe all the way out, and then hold it for 5 at the bottom,
Mhm.
and then breathe all the way in, and just keep repeating. You could do this for 5 sets or 10 sets, do it for 60 seconds. And what happens is that whether you know it or not, your brain switches tracks from sympathetic to parasympathetic, like that. And over time, the more consistent you do this little breathing technique, and there's lots of ones out there, it's just one of my favorites.
Mhm.
um, your body, your brain automatically begins to reset. And all of a sudden, what may have triggered you, that stressor or that deadline, all of this, you're just not responding in the same way that you used to.
Mm. Mhm.
So you're literally changing the way that your brain works. And so I love that little technique. And if just 30 seconds or 60 seconds on the hour, even a week later, you have shifted the way that you respond to everyday stresses in your life.
I love that. And honestly, as you were doing that, I don't have, my essential oils by me, but like I felt it in my body too, because I do essential oils enough to where just watching you cover your face like that, I'm like, I can smell it too. And doing that breathing, helped me to just kind of like get more into my body. So I think about that, if you're repeating this exercise that you just showed us, like how your body really just responds to any action similarly to it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what a great thing to build into your system.
Mm-hmm. And it's so easy. And
Mhm.
that is self-care to me. That is
Mhm.
self-care. And that is that and it has such incredible long-standing benefits over
Mhm.
time. And then over time, you'll begin to notice. And over time, you'll begin to shift things. And it'll change the way that you're just changing your mode of operations.
Mhm.
It's really all
Mhm.
it is. And because whether you know it or not, you're operating for some level of mode. And if we can shift that mode of operation to just coming from a place of being able, life isn't going to get any less stressful.
Mhm.
And not that we couldn't create something, but your demands, your email list, your text messages, that's a lot of that's not going to change.
Right, absolutely.
I'll go into my Gmail right now. There are all kinds of people who need all kinds of things from me right this second. And,
Yeah.
that's not going to change at all. And it's just a matter of how we decide to manage those moments. So what we
Mhm.
decide to do, how we decide to create those boundaries, how we decide to create our day throughout the day, so that we're operating from a place of calm. We're operating from a place of a place of ease and grace, not from
Mhm.
a place of stress. And I absolutely believe it's 100% possible that you can create a 7-figure business. You can create a big mission. You can raise money for the biggest causes and still have ease and grace.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to come from a massively hard place. It doesn't have to come from hustle or grit. It doesn't have to be any of that. The grind, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
I inherently believe that you can create what you want and still be able to operate from a mode of operations that's really serving your body.
That's so beautiful and such a message that women need to hear. So thank you for sharing that. Man, I feel like I could go on with you for hours. Like there's so many good things, but um, let people know how they can get in touch with you and what's going on in your world.
Yeah, so I have a podcast as well that Christine is about to be on. I just recorded her intro, outro. So excited to be able to share your brilliance there. But it's called Essentially You. It's a podcast devoted, it's very similar to Christine's, to women's hormone health and really about becoming the CEO of your health.
Mm.
Because especially for women, we got to advocate a lot more. I know you guys talk a lot about that on this show, but really giving the tools to not only take care of your body at home, but then how do we advocate? How do we look for the signs? How do we ask the right questions? How do we know what tests to ask for? That's a lot of what we cover on the show. And so that's a great place. And then I've written 8 books, working on,
It's
no,
crazy. I
finishing number
can't even
8
believe
right
it.
now. So on Amazon, you can find the books as well. I have my essential oils hormone solution came out about a year and a half ago. And so
Nice.
that's available too.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. So we'll put links to that so everybody can go check those out. Thank you so much for being on. There was such a wealth of information that you shared with us today that I think is really going to make connections in women's minds that, may have not understood really how stress was impacting all these different aspects of
Okay.
themselves and their entire health. So yeah, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Was
having me, Christine.
absolutely. All right, you guys, I will see you next time. Have a good one.